we all know that the top details that Tubby Smith demoted the father of two of his players, Keelan Lawson. They ultimately decided to transfer. And as a result, there's been a lot of other transfers that kind of just make Tubby Smith and this Memphis program look bad. What's actually going on here?
Well, it does go back to the day that Tubby Smith was hired. He inherited a situation that should have been, I think, interpreted as a gift, and instead he saw it for whatever reason as an issue. That he had the father of his two best players and two other future likely McDonald's All-Americans on his staff. Tubby wanted to bring his own assistants from Texas Tech, a guy named Pooh Williamson, another man named Joe Esposito, and then he wanted to his son was in an administrative role, Tubby's was, at Texas Tech, but he wanted to make him a full-time assistant. In college basketball, you only get 3 of those. And so when faced with the decision to either promote his son to a full-time assistant or maintain Keelan Lawson as a full-time assistant, he decided to promote his son and demote Keelan Lawson. Now, Keelan said all the right things publicly, but privately he felt wronged because part of the deal when he was hired at Memphis was, we'll make you a full-time assistant if you bring your kids to the University of Memphis. To use Keelan's words, he said, I held up my end of the deal. The University of Memphis did not. And so it leads to last week him announcing that his boys, Dedrick and KJ, who were Memphis' two best players by far, they combined to average like 31 points, 16 rebounds, and 7 assists a game last year. And they were statistical monsters. We're going to transfer. And then, of course, earlier this week, I reported that they are transferring to Kansas. What makes this even more of an issue is that once those two, it becomes clear they're out the door, well, then the other players realize that they're not going to be very good next year. So now Markel Crawford, who might have done this either way, but certainly was never going to return without Dedrick and KJ Lawson, is going to be a grad transfer. He's out. Long story not so long, 6 of Memphis' top 8 players have already announced since the end of the season that they are transferring. Right now, only 2 scholarship players who were on last year's team are set to be on next year's team. Meantime, Keelan Lawson isn't just the father of Dedrick and KJ Lawson, who are Memphis' 2 best players this year. He's got a son named Chandler Lawson, who's a top 20 player in the class of 2019. He's got a son named Jonathan Lawson, top 10 player in the class of 2021, and a nephew named DJ Jeffries, who also lives in the area, who's a top 10 player in the class of 2019. In other words, if all you did was keep Keelan Lawson on staff, he would have delivered 5 consensus top 55 recruits, 4 of whom were likely going to end up going down as McDonald's All-Americans. Now you burn that bridge completely, and there's not much to be optimistic about at the University of Memphis right now.
Yeah, it's a bad look. Gary Parrish here, CBS College Sports Hoops writer. But can you fault Tubby Smith here? Shouldn't you have control of your own program? Because you know just as well as I do that recruiting is half the battle here. And if you don't have control of half of the battle, meaning half of your power is in someone else's hands, aren't you kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face type of thing?
I guess I would say this. Absolutely, Tubby deserves control of his own program and should be able to make whatever personnel decisions he wants. I guess I would just say before I eliminated myself from 5 top 55 recruits, 4 of whom are going to likely go down as McDonald's All-Americans, I would make sure that I'm able to fill the cupboard, if you will, with comparable talent. To this date, the University of Memphis staff that's in place right now has not enrolled or taken a commitment from a top 100 player. It's mostly JUCOs and guys who would otherwise be going to mid-major schools. And so, at the end of the day, college basketball it's a player's game.
Yep.
I mean, it is hard to be good without good players. And not only have you essentially run off your top 2, you've eliminated the reasonable opportunity to recruit literally the 3 best prospects coming through the city of Memphis in the next few years. The only coach in my lifetime, and I'm 40 years old, who has ever succeeded at Memphis without relying heavily on Memphis players is John Calipari.
Yeah.
And that's because he could go to Baltimore and get the top kid. He could go to Atlanta and get the top kid. He could go to Detroit and get the top kid. He could go to Chicago and get the top kid. He's John Calipari. Every other coach has had to rely heavily on Memphis players, and right now Memphis has no inroads with any of the local talent. primarily because of the way the Keelan Lawson situation was handled.
CBS's Gary Parrish here. Gary, what happens to Tubby Smith now, though? Does he get a little bit of a leash, or is this going to be quick and over for him?
Well, I keep hearing from Memphis fans who are optimistic for whatever reason, perhaps just because they prefer to live life that way, which I can't fault. They say, hey, you got to give Tubby time. Well, nobody's not going to give Tubby time. Like, it's not up to me to, I don't have $13 million to buy him out of his contract. He's going to get time because also the University of Memphis doesn't have $13 million to buy him out of his contract. It is not a Power 5 school with Power 5 money. And so he's going to have time to build this in whatever way he wants and can. The issue becomes how is he going to build it?
Yeah.
Because I think if you would talk to him privately, he would tell you, I'm going to get my kind of guys, and in 2 or 3 years, we'll be ready to compete for an NCAA tournament bid. And I don't doubt that that's true. The issue with that philosophy is that at Memphis, the fan base has never been happy recruiting 3-star prospects and trying to be good. They've always recruited 4- and 5-star prospects and strive to be great. And I don't mean just John Calipari. I mean Dana Kirk in the 80s, Larry Finch after that, Josh Pastner after John Calipari. Whoever the Memphis coach has been, again, in my lifetime, which spans 4 decades, they've been able to recruit 4- and 5-star players and McDonald's All-Americans, and that's primarily by recruiting the rich local talent base. And right now that's not happening at all. And so, if Tubby Smith is going to be successful here, he's really going to try to do it, it seems like, in a different way, and that different way has never really worked, again, unless you're John Calipari.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. It also kind of worked at the University of North Carolina, who, because of the academic scandal, they couldn't get a lot of those top recruits, and they ultimately won a national championship. One last question for you, Gary. Gary Parrish here, CBS Sports College Hoops Insider. Isn't this better for Tubby Smith, though? Shouldn't he feel okay because he knows he has long-term security because of the buyout that's there, and he can do it his way and not be beholden to a quid pro quo that comes from something that preceded him?
Well, certainly. I mean, I would assume he feels okay about where he's at because he's where he's at by his own doing. Like, if he would have wanted to, he could have literally paid Keelan Lawson whatever he wanted to pay him to ensure that his kids stayed on campus until their eligibility was exhausted. Like, there are no limits on what he could have paid Keelan Lawson as a full-time assistant. If he wanted to pay him $700,000 a year to make sure Dedrick and KJ never left campus until they had no eligibility left, he could have done it. Honestly, I would have done something closer to that than just let them go because, again, I'm big on get the talent and we'll figure everything else out. But this is his approach. And so now we'll get to see how it goes. And there is no denying that he does have long-term security, and he will be given time to see if this works. But I guess I would say the issue is going to become if in year 3 you're scratching and clawing just to try to be relevant, and year 4 similar things. Well, Memphis had a coach before Tubby Smith that went to 4 straight NCAA tournaments, and even while he was doing that, the fan base wasn't happy because they thought they deserved more and they wanted more. So now basically Tubby's approach is aiming towards getting back to where Memphis was at a time when Memphis fans weren't even that happy with what they were.
Yeah, no, it's going to be difficult because he's going to be fighting his own crowd, which is never easy to do. Gary, I appreciate you joining and hopping on this morning.
It's my pleasure, buddy. Anytime.
Take care.